Pick Six with Mully and Haugh starts now.
What was the best thing and the worst thing about the Cubs and White Sox playing at the same time in the same city on the same night? The only time that's scheduled to happen, except for games they play each other. Did starters Lucas Giolito and Kyle Hendricks conjure images of the past?
Well, first of all, no question that there are images of the past when you have those guys. I mean, Kyle Hendricks in particular, because he really was significantly better, and he was the professor, and he really pitched the way you've seen him pitch, and it was almost a relief. Is that unfair to say? Lucas Giolito wasn't at his best, didn't have his best stuff, got through it, gave up a leadoff home run, so that's difficult to watch when you're kind of already down a game in a series and you're in the position that the Sox are in. But he got it together, and he did well for himself. I think that I'm not as mad about them playing at the same time in the city. I mean, they often play at the same time, or an hour difference or something, when one team's on the road and the other one is here. So I'm used to watching back and forth. It's just strange that they're both in Chicago. It's just a little weird to kind of watch the games. I knew you guys would be watching the Cubs games, so I was trying to watch the Sox. And then when there was, I'm being honest, and then when that Ohtani home run happened, I immediately switched over to the Cubs and watched the Cubs. And then by the time I had gotten back to the Sox game, you had the Vaughny clear the bases double, so I had to go back and watch that happen. So I was wearing out my DVR over the course of the two games, but there wasn't as much action happening. There weren't as many runs, let's say. So that the tension of a low-scoring, close game was more enticing to me than, once the Sox got their lead. I wound up watching the Cubs more than the Sox as a result.
I think this not only affects the people on the show, but the people listening to this show. This was not a good setup for anybody for Chicago baseball. You have the Angels in town.
Doesn't that happen all the time?
No, it doesn't happen all the time. You don't have
they
both
don't play
teams
at the same time.
No, not the both teams in the same
not
city.
in the same city.
But that's part of it. My point is that, and here's why. Let me just really quick. No, you're fine. But you have Mickey Mantle and Babe Ruth supposedly in town.
Right.
And if you're a Chicago sports fan, you should get over to 35th and Shields. They should have had good walk-up crowds. But you're competing with the Cubs on an absolutely beautiful weekend.
Oh, gorgeous.
I mean, you couldn't pay for the weather that
Postcard
Chicago
weather.
had.
It was gorgeous.
So on Memorial Day itself, the Cubs play the day game, the Sox play the night game. But the problem is that we get up at 2:30 in the morning on the day after the holiday, so you can't even stay up for the end of the Sox game. You certainly can't go to the Sox game. Then last night they're both playing in the evening, and then today they're playing at the same time during the day.
Yeah, that's the problem. I agree with you that is a problem, because which game do you want to go to? It's a beautiful sunny day to sit at Wrigley.
Fair enough.
But you got good stuff.
And I know
to look
these
at
sound
on
like the worries and the troubles that you guys have, but the point is, if Mickey Mantle and Babe Ruth are in town, you should probably go see Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, and the Unicorn.
Fair enough. Okay, I'm not going to whine about the schedule. We already have done that enough. I know, it's okay. From a baseball perspective, the best thing about last night was both teams winning, but also Adbert Alzolay coming through for the Cubs in a closer role. 2 innings of real shutdown, lockdown pitching out of the bullpen, a bullpen that has been much maligned. Adbert Alzolay's emergence, it creates some possibility there. It creates some hope there, where I think the last couple days we wondered about where this is headed. For the White Sox, Romy Gonzalez, as we mentioned earlier, since coming off the injured list, he's hitting .333. He's now hit home runs in 3 straight games. He's going to go for a 4th today if he's in the lineup. I hope he's in the lineup. Sounded like Pedro Grifol is going to put him in the lineup, and he is getting hot at the right time. They're developing a player there. Maybe they're finding something there. I hope it continues. But from a baseball perspective, solely from a baseball perspective, those were the 2 biggest developments last night. From a fan perspective, it is a little bit short-sighted of Major League Baseball to put the Angels against the White Sox in Chicago when you're competing against the Cubs because of the showcase possibility of having two of the greatest players in the game. And you want a city, a baseball city, a sports town focused on that. And they had their focus divided last night, and that doesn't seem right.
I think I surprised you with that question.
Well, yes, you did. A lot of people think about it.
That's the voice of Ozzie again. He'll be here at 8 o'clock. You like the news that Hayden Wesneski being recalled from Iowa and Rucker being optioned to AAA. How about the plan of using Wesneski being used out of the bullpen, be it in multiple innings guy or simply a one-inning appearance? Does it make sense to get the help via talent right now, even if the player remains part of the future as a starter in the rotation?
I don't know what to make of this. I want to know more. I am encouraged by Hayden Wesneski doing what was necessary at Iowa to make the Cubs feel like he's ready to come back for another tour. He apparently wasn't ready the first time. Maybe it was a numbers game. Maybe Kyle Hendricks coming back, precipitated him moving back to Iowa. I don't know, but he wasn't sharp the first go-around consistently enough to stay. I don't know what's changed. There certainly isn't a spot in the rotation for him unless you're going to find some sort of phantom injury for Jamison Tyone, which is possible, I suppose. But they sent Rucker down, I believe. So it's not a apples for apples exchange here. You've got a starter in a relief role who's never done it before. That's unusual for a young pitcher, especially, particularly when you consider that he is a guy that is projected to be part of your rotation moving forward. I don't know what the plans are. The Cubs don't want to waste his talent, but with all this talk about Keegan Thompson getting stretched out and this guy can't be used in this situation, how they're going to use Hayden Wesneski will be very interesting to see. And I mean that interesting in a positive way because this is a progress for his career. So, yes, I'm happy he's back.
I think it's fantastic. You get the best arms in your organization that are major league ready, and you put them on the major league team. Every pitch, in my opinion, that Wesneski was down in Iowa doing when he's working into the fourth inning it's just a waste. Wasted pitches.
Bullets.
Okay, he is a young guy. If it next year you stretch him back out again, this shouldn't be a big deal. I mean, he might have closer type stuff. If they don't really have it, maybe he's the guy that grabs a hold of that slot if he's given the opportunity. Alzolay sure looked the part last night, but I don't know if Alzolay can go back-to-back days. Now, again, nobody goes back-to-back days for 2 innings. I get that at the end of a game. I understand that. But get the best arms in your organization that are major league ready and put them on the major. Assad might be a starter down the line. And so might Wesneski. But if they're the two best arms, get them up here and get guys out.
I think he belongs on the major league club. I think it was sad when Wesneski was sent down because he is a future starter, a big part of this thing. Listen, this is not unusual. This used to be the way this went. I remember Mark Burley as a reliever, and then he became Mark Burley. And I think that Wesneski, what I love about him is there is like a bounce and an energy to that guy that again with that Wrigley crowd going, he's gonna do well in whatever situation you put him in. I really got a lot of time for him, and I'm glad. And you're right, Dustin. You've got to listen. You're falling apart. Your season is falling apart in part because your bullpen has been absolute garbage. So now you got a guy that is a major league quality pitcher. And you're using him. Maybe it's not the right way. Maybe eventually he needs to be back in the starting rotation, and maybe that happens as soon as the trade deadline, depending on things go.
We can talk about this later, too, because I wonder about Wesneski coming up and Keegan Thompson staying down.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If your arms you want them the best
David,
ones on the major league roster, you guys both say right.
Who would you want sent down? Tyon. But you can't do that because you got $68 million invested. Right. You got no choice to do it. Right. You can't even make up an injury and have him go down for a month to recover.
Are you limping, James?
Yeah, exactly.
It looks like you might be limping.
That might be the answer.
Oh, David, I know exactly what your question was.
On the Score Tuesday, David Ross compared Matt Mervis' struggles to Julio Rodriguez, who was hitting .205 without a home run in his first 20 games last year, yet still became the Rookie of the Year. And Anthony Rizzo, who hit .167 in his first 20 MLB games with the Padres with only one homer. Are those good comps or wishful thinking?
Those are wishful. That is the definition of wishful thinking, right? I mean, you pick two guys that had to struggle to get to where they're at, and you say that's all this is. This guy is going to make you forget about Anthony Rizzo. That's what you're saying, and I mean, here's hoping, but I don't know that. I don't know for every of those two, could you not come up with about 30 guys that came up and had a big reputation and then went right back down? I think again. You know, this is like when we're comparing players around draft time. Well, this guy is going to wind up being like a 7-time Pro Bowler. This guy is going to be a 12-time All-Star because he plays just like this other guy. Guys struggle, and we're staying with them is all he's saying. But there's going to be a time. Wasn't Rizzo sent back down before he came back up?
Yeah.
I think that's fine to make those comparisons, but it is, above all else, that's wishful thinking.
Yes and yes, like Steve Stone would say.
Thank you, Dustin. I heard
That's
that.
it? Is that it?
Well, yeah, yes, it is a good comparison, I believe, and yes, it's also wishful thinking.
Okay.
Yes and yes.
Fair enough.
I think what it said to me when I heard David Ross say that yesterday was, number one, the Cubs believe in Matt Mervis, and they're going to give him every opportunity to succeed or fail. And they're going to really hope upon hope that he succeeds. I don't know. I don't like comparing guys like this to, number one, a Rookie of the Year, and number two, a Cub legend. I think those are some pretty weighty comparisons. It sounds a lot like wishful thinking. I don't know if he's going to be like Julio Rodriguez and Anthony Rizzo or Brian LaHara and Frank Schwindel. Which is it? What direction is he headed? I don't know that we know yet. So I understand the desire to praise and compliment Matt Mervis where he is, and he's struggling mightily. So if you're the Cubs, you've got to wrap your arms around him and try to lift him as you give him every opportunity to succeed. But I do think this is a bit of a stretch, and I do think this is one of those things that, you know, in the media, if we were to make this comparison, people would scoff like, "Oh my God, you guys are exaggerating! It's crazy." And when the manager says it, you're a little bit more tempered in your reaction, but it is a bit crazy. Those are two elite players, and if Matt Mervis ends up being like them, wow, the Cubs are onto something. I just don't know what they have seen. Maybe last year. Again, last year was last year. What we're seeing this year is more troubling. I hope he can turn it around.
Great question.
The Bears will host the media for the second time in OTAs this afternoon. Any chance Jalen Johnson, Nate Davis are on hand? What about Eddie Jackson? How about Darnell Mooney, thought to be recovering from injuries? Anything to see here, or is it time to just move along?
Not time to move along. It's the Bears and OTAs. It's the NFL. You don't move along. You don't miss an opportunity for any cue that might tell you something about the season ahead. If Jalen Johnson isn't there, that's another cue. It's another hint. It's another issue that needs to be addressed at some point in time. It's unresolved now. Maybe it won't be resolved until there's a new contract. I don't know. I got some grief last week from some Bears fans who think it was overreacting to Jalen Johnson missing his first OTA and trying to, minimize his value to this defense. He's a very good cornerback. I don't want that to get lost in this conversation. He's a very good cornerback. But there might be a difference between what he thinks he's worth and what the team thinks he's worth, especially given the young players they have at that position, especially with the defense that they play. So if Jalen Johnson isn't there today, I'm less worried about Nate Davis. I think he's going to show up. He signed a contract to be a Chicago Bear. He's going to be there. They're going to count on him. He's also got a track record. He's a veteran. Jalen Johnson, also a veteran, but has a track record with this regime as maybe not being the most compliant guy. So get there. I know it's voluntary. I know it's voluntary, but it makes a statement when you aren't volunteering to be there. So that's the way football coaches will look at it, and that's the way it will be interpreted.
I would be disappointed if all four weren't there. It doesn't make any sense to me. And if they're not there, then the Bears need to do them, meaning these four players, a solid and explain to us, the media, so we can get that information to the fans. Because them not being there and the Bears saying, we're coaching who's here, it's voluntary, we're moving along with who's here, that does not help out the people that aren't there. And it doesn't make any sense, especially the new right guard for the Chicago Bears. So you paid good money.
$30 million.
He wanted to come here because the Bears paid him. The Bears wanted him here. It's a lot of money. Mully, what do you always say? A lot of money comes with expectations back, right? Something along those lines.
To whom much is given, much is expected.
So show up. And if there's something going on, I'm sorry that there's something going on, then it's excused. But let us know that. Do the player a favor, Bears, and don't hide behind, it's personal. Then say it's personal. Say he's got something going on. Okay, then we'll back off. But there's 99 days until kickoff. Let's go.
Yeah, we are in the countdown. That's accurate. Look, it's a voluntary portion of the program, but it clearly is something that they want you to be a part of. And it's clearly, in their opinion, a recognition of whether you've bought in or haven't. Now, when the minicamp starts and it is no longer voluntary, that's a big story if someone doesn't show up. But it is voluntary. There are veterans around the league that don't feel they need it, that don't want to turn up at it. Usually, though, if you're joining a new team, you're going to kind of turn up and show that you want to be part of what they're doing. I think the Jalen Johnson thing is a separate issue and more interesting than anything else, because a year ago, they had the same issue with Roquan Smith. It got personal, and they had to move him. And then what did they do? They went out and signed a guy at big money to replace the guy they got rid of. Are they going to have to do the same thing at cornerback? Because you're right, David, they got young corners, but do you trust those young players to develop into players? You're just creating more problems in the future if you can't figure out a way of getting it done.
I believe there's a difference, though, between the Darnell Mooney and Eddie Jackson question and the other two guys.
I do, because those are injury related.
Those are injury related.
And you know what? How hard would it be to say that? I think you ought to say that.
Fair enough.
Just let us know.
Clarity.
Dustin's right about
we want some clarity there. Yeah.
That's the answer to the question of why.
Is there any chance Miami's Jimmy Butler is the best player on the floor in the NBA Finals? What about his teammate, Caleb Martin? Is this really all about the Joker, Jokic? Could Jamal Murray be the key player for Denver? If you were starting a team or building for 1 year, which guy would you take, or is the answer the same?
I like this question. If I were starting a team, I would take the Joker without a question. It's not even close. And I might take Jamal Murray second, frankly, because he's young and he's kind of gotten through the injury portion of the program. The Joker is the two-time MVP that should be a three-time MVP, frankly. He should have won that award this year. And if he wins the championship, it'll underscore it. So I think he's just a different type of player. I think he's the best player on the floor in the finals. I think Jimmy is extraordinary. And what Jimmy has done, this is a remarkable run. This is an 8th seed that has gotten through the play-in and is now in the NBA Finals. And if they were to win, and listen, I'm not saying they're going to win the finals, but they're going to break their hump. They're not going to go out easy. They're not an easy out, regardless of any talent deficiency. But I think it's going to be the Joker who's the best player on the floor, and I think Jamal Murray is probably the second best player on the floor, and I think that's going to be a big problem trying to match that up for Miami. But they're going to work hard. They're going to come up with stuff. They got really good coaching. I just think this Denver team is better. It's the better team of the two.
Well, now what you just said there, it's the better team of the two. I think the Celtics had the better players, but the Heat had the better team.
Agree.
So if we're looking for like one year, one series, I might go with Jimmy Butler. His will to win is really unmatched in today's NBA, in my opinion. I mean, I like everything about the Joker. It's just bizarre. Like, he does it so like
he does everything.
Averaging a triple double is no big thing for him. It seems like even though it should be a big deal. And then, like, the report after they won the West, he was, like, lifting weights. And then did you hear this? I heard this on the score. He was lifting weights. And did you hear what music he was listening to?
Country?
No. The Steve Miller Band.
Really?
I'm the Joker, I'm the Toker, or, I'm the Midnight Smoker, however the lyrics are. But can you just see him, like, mouthing those lyrics while he's, like, bench pressing or doing...
Fly Like an Eagle, right?
Just hilarious
Steve
to me.
Miller Band? Wow, I did
that
not
is
hear
also
that.
Steve Miller Band.
Interesting. I think this is the series where America gets introduced, as odd as that sounds, to Nikola Jokic. And he is the guy at 28 years old. People are going to say, like, wow, I didn't realize he was that good. I didn't realize he was that dominant. And he will be that good and that dominant in this series. He clearly is going to be the best player on the floor. And he obviously would be the number one player that you choose if you're starting a franchise. He is the MVP. He is the guy that can't be stopped. He does it all, and he does it all willingly and very humbly. I love everything about him, and I think people are going to look at this and say, wow, they play basketball in Denver? Cool. We're going to have to stay up later and watch some of those games next year. I with due respect to what the Miami Heat are all about, and with due respect to what Jimmy Butler has accomplished in his career, since leaving the Bulls, since leaving the Timberwolves, since leaving the Sixers, this is his fourth marriage, and it's working quite well, and is going great. So I don't think, though, they're going to be able to get over the top against the Nuggets. They're deeper than the Celtics. They're smarter than the Celtics, and they shoot better than the Celtics. So that's going to be the difference. Jamal Murray might be the second best player in this series. You're exactly right, Mully, because people don't know about him either. But he can change a game in 2 minutes. He can get hot and just not miss, and then all of a sudden you go from being down 3 to up 6. So this is going to be a great series, but it all starts with the Joker.
And it's a pick six!
Are you on board with the friend of the program, Sean Sharania, reporting the Bulls have started contract extension talks with Vooch? Does this signal to you a status quo for next season, and would you approve of that?
This definitely signals a status quo that the Bulls are embracing. This is not a surprise. If you've been paying attention, you have heard from AK, you have seen what they have done, and frankly, what they haven't done. They have until June 30th to work out an extension before he might hit the open market. It would not shock me at all if they come to terms. I think that you look at Vooch, and he may want to test the open market, but he might be disappointed in what he will find. He has a degree of certainty with the Bulls that he knows, even though it was a disappointing year, even though there are things that he can't control, he understands that he's also playing with two guys in Zach and DeMar that are going to be reliable teammates. He's going to be part of their version of the big three. I hate that term, but it is what the Bulls kind of view, how they view it. So not a surprise. They're embracing the status quo. They're going to run it back and see if they can find shooting and maybe a lead guard in the draft or wherever they can find maybe an undrafted guy. Hey, how about that? Does that ever work for a team? Can they find undrafted guys that contribute?
I don't think the Bulls have any other choice.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
I totally agree. I think that they're locked into having absolutely zero choice as to what they can do. They've got to keep this guy. They've invested too much, and they're going to do it. So they'll come up with some kind of deal. I would almost prefer they waited until he took a look at the market because that might help them more. But they'll get it done. Simple as that.
You afraid of them setting their own
Yes.
price for him?
Yes.
Setting the market?
I think that's a mistake. All right.